Hello, church family. Welcome to Friday. All right, we're going to continue our catechism. Today is question 11. If you remember back to what Josh shared on Monday and Robbie got at on Tuesday, the big commands to love God and love others, well, we see that in the Ten Commandments. They start off really focused on loving God, and now we're starting to see some transition to spelling out a little bit what does it look like now to love others. So today, question 11, we're going to focus even more on what it looks like to love others. Here's the question. What does God require in the 6th, 7th, and 8th commandments? Here's the answer. 6th, that we do not hurt or hate or be hostile to our neighbor, but be patient and peaceful, pursuing even our enemies with love. 7th, that we abstain from sexual immorality and live purely and faithfully, whether in marriage or in single life, avoiding all impure actions, looks, words, thoughts, or desires, and whatever might lead to them. And 8th, that we do not take without permission that which belongs to someone else, nor withhold any good from someone we might benefit. So, we do not murder, we do not commit sexual immorality, and we do not steal. These are some ways in which we love other people. These are direct commands from God. And it's not just about what we do or do not do, is it? Jesus in the New Testament, he takes these commands and he actually elevates them. And he says, even if you think ill of your brother, you're committing murder. Jesus focuses everything back on our hearts. This can be difficult for us, and it should make it plain that if that's the case, then all of us have been murderers and thieves and have committed sexual immorality. In fact, this is how Paul says it in Romans 13, verse 9. This is how he sums it up. He says, "For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself." I think it's fascinating that this is something that God needed to put in commandments for Old Testament Israel and that we still have today. In a very real sense, we need to be told how to love each other. God, toward the end of the Old Testament, he says that in future days, he's going to write the new covenant on our hearts. And since Pentecost in the New Testament, we've been given the Spirit. So in a sense, we have some sort of innate guidance on how to love each other. So none of us are without excuse when we do sin against a fellow brother or sister. We are now held accountable for that. It's been written on our hearts. We have something innate in there by God's grace for us. And yet we all don't love perfectly, do we? We still transgress against God's 10 commandments on how we're supposed to love each other. I think that something that is so beautiful about this is that God has given us his Spirit, because without that we would never be able to obey, and only by God's grace are we able to obey these even imperfectly. And hopefully over time, if you're a believer, you're obeying these more and more faithfully by the work of God's Spirit. And we also have Jesus, so we can depend upon Jesus to actually obey these perfectly in God's sight. Jesus did what we never could. So now we as believers trust him, and his righteousness is given to us so that in God's sight we can perfectly obey these commandments. That is a beautiful truth for us today, knowing that we don't perfectly love each other. So again, what's the question? Question 11. What does God require in the 6th, 7th, and 8th commandments? 6th, that we do not hurt or hate or be hostile to our neighbor, but be patient and peaceful, pursuing even our enemies with love. 7th, that we abstain from sexual immorality and live purely and faithfully, whether in marriage or in single life, avoiding all impure actions, looks, words, thoughts, or desires, and whatever might lead to them. And 8th, that we do not take without permission that which belongs to someone else, nor withhold any good from someone we might benefit. And in Jesus, we have perfect obedience. Hope that's a comfort for you today.